Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to be with you all in the basement. I don't think I've been down here before. I know I haven't been down here before. But we're really connected to the earth here, right? On this spot. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story about my religious upbringing to start today. And I've shared bits and pieces of this, and those of you who've heard me talk before would know that I grew up primarily Roman Catholic. I had a unique experience, though, because I was actually baptized as an Eastern Catholic. So my dad's heritage is Ukrainian, and he grew up as an Eastern Catholic, or what they call Byzantine Catholic. And then my mom heritage is Polish, and she grew up as Roman Catholic. So I sort of had these two, the kind of the yin and the yang of Catholicism when I was young, and it was very interesting and really quite amazing, actually. So, and the way that this happened in my life was my parents were actually married in a Byzantine church because they kind of defaulted to my dad's in the tradition of that time, in my dad's church. Yet there aren't a lot of Byzantine Catholic churches around. So pretty much, but in Chicago, which is where I grew up as a kid, there's literally a Catholic church like on every corner, right? So almost, and there's just as many bars in every corner. So we went to. So I grew up in Bucktown for the first 7 years of my life, and we went to a Roman Catholic church called St. Hedwig's in Bucktown. One of these beautiful, over 100-year-old structures now. And I was always enamored by the beauty of the physical church. And if you've been into any old Catholic church in Chicago, it's amazing. So, just as this young boy going into church, the church, I'm talking about the building, it's just this sensory experience just hits you. And the first thing was walking into the church, sort of in the foyer. There's this huge crucifix, right? Full life sculpture crucifix, and at that time it wasn't. It was just I was amazed by it. I didn't understand the whole Jesus story at the time, and I didn't grow up in a violent experience as a child, so it just was bizarre to me. But I was just always fixated on it. It was amazing. So this life-size, literally kind of Jesus sculpture on the cross, and that was the first thing that always hit me about going into that church. And then as I would go further into it and go to mass with my parents or my grandparents, just the rest of it is this huge sensory experience. And all of the paintings on the walls were amazing. The stained glass, of course, especially when the brilliant sunlight's shining through. The statues, the statuary, and then all of the marble ornamentation. So the altar was all this marble structure, brilliantly sculpted. And then the smells. So you have this incense always, even after it's burned, it just kind of wafts through, and it's on everything, and so you have this multi-sensory experience, and it's really something. And as a kid, I was amazed. And whenever I go into an old church, even now, I just like to wander around, to just get a sense of the place. And it goes back to when I was a kid and had this experience at St. Hedwig's. And then. So that's the Roman Catholic kind of sensory experience of the church as a building, and really being drawn into it and amazed by it. And then once a year, because my parents were married in the Byzantine church, we would go to the south side, 49th and Sealy, to the church where they got married, and for their anniversary. And that was a different experience. Sensory experience altogether. And if you've never been to a Byzantine church, it's very, very theater-esque. So the whole mass is sung, literally, from beginning to end. Everything is a song. It's the you know the art is very different. You have if you've seen it's similar to the iconography that you would see in Russian churches, that kind of art. So just different, and again, fascinating, because I only did this once a year with my parents. We'd go to this church, and it's always something new. And then communion. Now, in the Roman Catholic Church, you have to be of a certain age to take communion. You go, so it's whatever, it's 7 or 8 or something like that. I don't remember. But in the Byzantine Church, you can take communion the first time you step in. And when you go into a Byzantine church, there's platter of bread that you, if you're going to take communion, you actually pick your piece of bread, which is like this little cube of bread. It's not a wafer. It's this cube, and you take it with the tongs and you put it into a plate. And that way they know that they have exactly enough for everybody. So if you're intending to take communion that day, the first thing you do, walk into church, you take the cube and you put it into the plate. And, just so there's this other aspect now of touching stuff, which is neat. Because in the Roman Catholic Church, you didn't touch anything. But in the Byzantine Church, it's actually very tactile. So, I put my communion cube, if you will, into the plate. And then what they do at communion in the Byzantine churches, the priest has a chalice of wine, and they take a spoon. So when you step up, the priest will take your cubes, dip it in the wine, and then you tilt your head back, and then they drop in your mouth. Now, again, another like this taste experience now, which is amazing. You don't get that with a wafer. And again, this was once a year, and and I didn't, as a kid, it's not like I drunk wine when I was a kid either. So I have this bread and this wine experience once a year, which is really powerful because that alcohol, you get a little warmth coming down the throat. So, and then but the best part of the Byzantine experience as a kid was at the end, because all the bread that was left over, the altar boys would hold it in the bowls, and it literally these huge bowls of bread. And you could just grab a handful if you wanted to. And it was the best bread I ever had. I mean, it's just delicious, completely delicious.
Sometimes when I go to my grandma's to stay, we go for the weekend, we go to church, and hers is a Roman Catholic church, so I haven't done my communion yet.
Yeah. If you get to a Byzantine church, you can do it. So if you find one.
And the statue, her church is really big.
Yeah.
So the statue is it's all brass and it's super big.
Yeah. That's the way they make them. Everything's super big, right? Yeah, and as a kid, it was amazing to me. So it's just wow. All this stuff really hit me, and then the holidays, of course, are like that too, because Christmas and Easter, you have the food and you have even more song and all of that. So I was really enamored as a child by all of this sensory experience, and I think any kid would be. It's just there's so much there, and it's so rich. Now, where they lost me was with the dogma. And if you've gone to a Catholic church, you're familiar with the Missalette, which is basically the kind of the prayer book, and it would have all of the masses in there. And there was always something, I'd read it at the very beginning. It said something about communion. Specifically, it would say that unfortunately we cannot offer communion to our Christian brothers and sisters who are not Catholic. And that exclusionary attitude, just that rule, just never sat with me. And this is where this was sort of the beginning of the end of my experience of practicing Catholicism. Now, just to jump forward real quick, it was all redeemed for me in the sense that when I went back to Loyola for my graduate degree in pastoral counseling, I got back in touch with Catholic spirituality. I think that's what, as a kid, that's what really resonated with me, was the spirituality. And I think actually the multisensory experience is part of that. and as I said, they lost me with the dogma, but then when I came back and got my master's degree at Loyola, which is a Jesuit school, got reconnected with that spiritual piece to me, which is really the holiness of it. So, in any case, but I did leave the church for about 10 years or so, and so is my wilderness experience spiritually. Just not even having a church home and just getting mired in my career, worldly accomplishments, all of the doing stuff of life that we're conditioned is important. So I did that, and then happened, and I think I've shared this before, I found unity when I was in my 30s and felt at home instantly because of the meditation. And the Unity Church I went to in Chicago was Unity Church of Peace, which was in the Lakeview, kind of Lakeview, Lincoln Park area, more Lakeview. But it was in a storefront. And, growing up and going to these amazing Catholic places and spaces, it was completely an opposite experience going into a small church that was in a storefront that had no ornamentation at all. Completely the opposite experience. However, what it did is it stoked that other sensory piece in the form of the meditation. So in Unity, what I found was my inner sanctuary and got in touch with that in meditation. So after having spent so long in the sanctuary of the physical building and being enamored by how beautiful they can be, you realized, and I realized, how much more powerful the inner sanctuary can be. And that's what in Unity meditation taught me. And there's that saying, like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And that was my experience in Unity and in finding Unity Church of Peace. Now, I say all this because I was thinking about how we consciously evolve through life. And there's always, and this is something I believe we're all encoded with. So God has programmed us, if you will, that's not the best word, but let's say encoded, or has endowed us with this curiosity, this deep yearning to be in union with it. And I absolutely felt that when I was young. And I wouldn't have had the words for it, but I experienced it through all the sensory environment that was created. And then in Unity, and then I lost touch with that, as I said, for a while, but again, that impulse continues. Right? You were talking about the darkness that your son went through. Yet I believe there's an impulse. It's always with us, and that's the omnipresence of the Spirit, that even if we don't realize it's there, it's seeing us through in some way. So even in my wilderness period where I wasn't going to church at all, I didn't feel like I had a spiritual life. I was mired in doing just accomplishment. And nevertheless, there was something dormant, yet still active deep inside of me that was directing me towards something even greater. And when I found Unity and really felt like I was at home, as soon as I went into meditation, it's like there it was, the power of that inner sanctuary. So, and we all have this. We're all endowed with this. So wherever you are at in your life, whatever you're experiencing, whatever the challenges are, we are all encoded. We are all endowed with this impulse to continue to evolve. And there are some hazards to this, of course. And I call it like the joyful hazards of consciously evolving. Because one of the first ones is that, like, the sense is that, like, do you ever get the sense that nobody gets you? Right? Like when you have a profound experience and it changes how you show up in your life. do you ever get the sense like, okay, now nobody gets me? And I spent so much of my earlier career-based life really striving to fit in and be accepted. And I did. And then at some point, that's not quite enough anymore. For me, becoming spiritually attuned through unity changed or really transformed who I was and how I showed up. And then you get the sense, well, then like nobody gets me anymore. and that's one of the first challenges, but it's what I call a joyful hazard of conscious evolution. Because if you can get through that piece, that nobody gets me, the rewards for moving through that are all the greater. Because we need not worry about whether anybody gets us or not. Because one, there are people who will. I mean, like we're all gathered here today, and if we were to have a panel discussion about unity and our spiritual experiences, we would get one another. So I'm grateful for that. Our understanding becomes different. So our faith becomes different. We move from what's called a blind faith to what the Fillmores called an understanding faith. And that understanding faith is that when we actually embody this spiritual experience, and when we realize it's not about what's out there, but what's about what's in here, the inner sanctuary, we can have a faith that, like your son did, where in the middle and through the darkness, there's a spiritual practice happening that understands and knows that he will come out the other side of that. All the stronger, blessed, loved. And that's the understanding faith. So that when we're in the middle of the muck, that we know, our faith knows through our own spiritual practice through the years that there is coming out on the other side is a reality. And it's happening right now as well. One of the other joyful hazards of conscious evolution is that the truth you live is no longer mainstream. That it's the road less traveled, and we're a co-creator of the new road. That you no longer fit in, but you fit out. And that you're, in a weird way, we're kind of opting out of our past circles of acquaintances, even friends, and sometimes family. Because in order to continue to consciously evolve, we're finding those that hold the same frequency, or even a higher frequency. It's actually better if we surround ourselves with those who are vibrating at a higher frequency, because it's helping to expand us upward. But then the hazard is that we are likely to lose touch with those who don't resonate at the frequency, and we're all on our own path. So it's not that we can't ever be in touch again with others, or that we can't encourage them, or that we're judging anyone. But we realize that we need to seek out that higher vibration. So it changes who's in our circles. And the conventional wisdom, what Emmett Fox would call the race consciousness, or another term that I use is the conventional consciousness, it would trick us to believe that something is wrong with us when we're going through this experience. And I know that there were a lot of people in my Catholic circles in my family who was like, I really couldn't talk about unity to so much because there wasn't any. It was hard to find any common ground other than God. But just the whole practice of meditation was absolutely foreign to people in my Catholic circles when I was younger. Just it was never a concept. There was prayer, of course, but meditation as a whole, like the inner sanctuary, would have been an odd idea to talk about. So, And if we allow ourselves to regress to that conventional consciousness, we're looking to fit back in when we can't fit back in anymore. And my message to you is that it's okay. Actually, we can be grateful for that. That there is nothing wrong with us, but rather it's like everything is right with us. And when we take ourselves deep into meditation, when we continue to be conscious of the omnipotence and the omnipresence of God in every single moment of our life, every single heartbeat, every single action, every single breath, we are being sustained and supported and loved through it all. And as our consciousness expands, and this is where we turn the corner then, because as our consciousness expands, what and who we attract changes. And going through a spiritual transformation can be a lonely thing. And when we turn the corner, we find that what we attract, who we attract, changes as well. Including the dormant aspects of oneself. So, if you ever wondered, where's that loving part of myself, or where's that creative part of myself, where's that expressive part of myself, or if you felt like you're less than ever, and you continue on a conscious spiritual practice, there are those parts of yourself that will show up to join you, with you, to co-create with you. So you are consciously evolving, as is all parts of yourself. And we need not be concerned about exactly how everything is going to manifest. We're especially in the West, such a doing-focused society, and we can plan, and we realize that we don't need to be attached to those plans. So there's virtue in planning, yet I think all of us can say we've probably planned most of our lives and things we've done in our lives, and it's never quite gone exactly to plan. It's a lesson that I've learned many, many times and continue to learn. And it's okay. Because with that deeper consciousness and really being in a co-creative partnership with the Spirit, we can trust that whatever adjustments are being made to the plan as we go along are divinely designed. And that's also part of understanding faith. That we need not be so attached to exactly how we planned it, because there is that divine, powerful, benevolent, absolutely benevolent support that's encouraging us through it all. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. The Christ consciousness, the absolute benevolent grace of God, working as us and through us for the benefit of all, quite truly. So, whatever hazards of conscious evolution you experience, invite you to ponder them and meditate on them and get in touch with the joyfulness of them and what joy they bring you ultimately for your deepest self-expression. And let's just take a moment then to end in prayer. And just go into that inner sanctuary. Becoming consciously attuned to the omnipresence of the Spirit, guiding you, supporting you, sustaining you, loving you through every single moment, every single heartbeat, every single breath of your life. And as you continue to build this consciousness in your life, and you join with others who are doing the same, indeed we trust and we have understanding, faith that not only we ourselves, but the world at large is transformed. And for this realization, we indeed are grateful. Amen and amen.